Hello, my friends. I'm glad you're here. What happens when we blink? The long answer is pretty obvious. We blink to clean our eyes, to keep them moist. But we also blink to allow our brains to process incoming images and stimulate our retinas. In the flash of time it takes to blink, our brains also do a momentary reset in an attempt to allow mental information to form and be considered. But during that time, for the briefest of moments, our brains stop. What happens during that time? That time we don't notice we aren't thinking, aren't looking, aren't processing. The short answer is everything. Close your eyes and enter the blink space. I hate working Friday nights, grumbled Danny. He had an apple, and he stared at it. The library was utterly silent except for the faint echoes of Danny's voice coming back at him. His own voice sounded terrible, so he opted for a different sound. He slid open a desk drawer, pulled out a sharp pencil, and tossed it dart-like at the apple. The first 3 times the pencil missed and skittered across the desk and fell on the floor. Each time, Danny struggled, trying to decide if he actually wanted to stand up and retrieve it. And each time being so overcome by boredom that the sound of pencil skittering overrode the effort of collecting the pencil. Finally, he struck the apple dead on. The pencil wavered, the point buried deep. He leaned closer, staring. Fascinating. "Excuse me," said the voice. At first, Danny thought it was the voice in his head, so he dutifully ignored it, as was his habit when the voices in his head tried interrupting an otherwise fascinating activity. "Excuse me," the voice persisted, and this time he looked up. His ears had clearly heard the voice. One of the students stood in front of the desk, as if needing help. "Am I interrupting your apple experience?" he asked. "It's Friday," said Danny, by way of explanation. This was sufficiently opaque to the student that it took him a few seconds to form a response. "I'm looking for a book," he said. Danny nodded. "Are you a student?" he asked. It was, unfortunately, not uncommon for non-students to try renting books. You could figure they could steal books from MIT or Harvard, but apparently those fine institutions didn't attract thieves nearly as well as Miskatonic. Apparently, Miskatonic's library was a sweet, sweet honeypot of some kind. "Yes," the man said, and handed a card over. Danny examined it, as if it were a $100 bill, as if it was possibly a clever fake. "You are Barry Ginsberg?" he asked. "I look enough like him, don't I?" the man asked. Danny narrowed an eye. Smart Alex didn't last very long at this school. Warily, he handed the card back. "How can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for a book." "Yes, I got that, but the shelves are open. Do you need help searching? We don't have anything in the computer yet, but the card catalog—" "I'm looking for a copy of the Necronomicon," said the man. "Okay." There was a silence between them. Danny kept hoping that the student would understand that silence was the equivalent of "please don't repeat your request and in fact go home." Barry leaned closer. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah," said Danny. "Okay, are you sure?" That's a rare book. Yeah, I'm working with Dr. McLaren. Danny nodded slowly. Be right back, he said, and stood up. The rare books room always smelled dank, a little bit like feet. Danny hated it. He came back. Here, he said, and handed the book to Barry. Barry stared at the title. You're joking, right? You don't want it? This isn't the book I asked for. Barry held the book up. It was a copy of Wee Tommy Schnizzlefritz. It's not? Asked Danny. I don't even know what this is. What is this, German? Danny peered at the book. Probably, he said. Barry set it down. I want a copy of the Necronomicon. Danny stared. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, I'm sure. Okay, I'll be right back. A few minutes later he came back and handed Barry a book. This should work, he said. Barry's eyes narrowed. Why are you doing this to me? He asked. He held the book up accusingly. This is Italian erotica. Yes, said Danny. I think you'll get more out of that than the other book. Are you... Is there something wrong with you? Barry asked. Why? These are not the books I'm looking for. Why can't you bring me the book I'm looking for? The Necronomicon is a very serious book, said Danny. A very dangerous book. I don't think it's such a good thing to be carrying around willy-nilly. Willy-nilly? I need it for class. Danny rested his head in his hand. Yes, I know. You told me. But it's very dangerous. Barry took a deep breath. Look, I'm a student, right? Yes. And you're the librarian, right? I am. So why can't you just bring me the goddamn book? Danny said, I can tell that we're not going to come to an agreement on this. He turned and left. 5 minutes later he returned, a large misshapen manuscript in his hands. Is this the Necronomicon? Barry asked. I don't think you're going to like it, said Danny. It's not some book of roomy poetry or some other crap. Danny looked offended. I told you it is, he said, but I really recommend against this. Just give me the book. Danny set the book on the counter and slid it across. Barry rested his hands against it. Feels weird, he said. I told you. I don't think this is a good idea. I do have a copy of some really nice roomy poetry, if you prefer. Barry stared at him. Check me out, please. Danny swiped Barry's card and the computer beeped obediently. Thank you. Barry started opening the book. I'd rather you not do that, said Danny. Barry glared at him and flipped the cover open. It was like a tornado. It was brilliant and sparkly, and there was a sound coming from it that was like a scream, but a scream that could never come from the throat of a man. Danny shaded his eyes. The book jumped and skipped, and the maelstrom of energy, barely contained, spun furiously around the room. Barry tried backing away, but a thread of energy, like a hooked finger, wrapped itself around him. He screamed, but another thread reached into his mouth, grabbing his tongue. His eyes sparked, his hair stood up, and his body lifted from the ground. Everything that was Barry was twisted and turned inside out, was thrown into the air, was tossed and spun, and eventually, once the book had extracted everything it could, slowly spiraled back down through the air, back down into the open pages, back deep into the book. The final impact shook the counter, flipping the book's cover closed. Danny uncovered his eyes and stared. He shook his head, picked the book up, and walked it back to the rare book room. A minute later, he sat back at his seat, pulled the pencil from the apple, aimed, and threw again. The pencil missed and flew to the floor. He glared at the pencil. I really hate Fridays. If you've enjoyed this story, many more can be found in the collection of short stories by Edward Martin III, Close Your Eyes, Tales from the Blank Space, available at Hellbender Media at hellbendermedia.com. Also, please consider joining their Patreon at patreon.com/hellbendermedia. This story was written by Edward Martin III and recorded and edited by Andrew Wakefield, who can be found at youtube.com/@awakesince1963.